Emily Carter stepped off the dusty military transport, her boots scuffing the hard-packed dirt of the forward operating base. The sun was a brutal overseer in the cloudless sky, scorching everything in its path. Her duffel bag, heavy with gear and dreams, thumped against her side with each careful step. At 23, she was the youngest member of her unit, fresh from rigorous training at Fort Benning, Georgia. The nervous energy coiled tightly in her stomach as she scanned the perimeter. Guards patrolled with alert eyes, vehicles rumbled past, and the scent of dust and diesel clung to the air like a tangible weight. Emily had dreamed of this moment for years, the opportunity to serve her country, to test herself in the crucible of duty. But as she approached the central command tent, doubt threatened to settle over her. She was aware of the whispers, seasoned soldiers questioning whether a rookie could survive the realities of war. Her heart pounded with a mixture of pride and fear. She was ready to prove herself, though she didn't yet know how. Captain Reynolds, a grizzled man in his 40s, with a stern face weathered by decades of deployment, stepped forward. His voice carried authority as he greeted her. "Carter," he said, offering a firm handshake. "You've got guts showing up here. Don't waste it." Emily nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, sir. I won't." Behind him, Sergeant Blake's eyes followed her every move. Blake, a man in his early 30s with a jaw perpetually clenched, had seen rookies come and go. Most failed to meet the expectations of the battlefield. His gaze was skeptical, assessing her posture, her expression, and the very way she carried herself. He muttered under his breath, "Another kid thinking she can handle this." Emily ignored the snide remark, focusing instead on steadying her breathing. She had come prepared, mentally and physically, but nothing could truly prepare someone for the first time under the glare of seasoned veterans. Her training at Fort Benning had taught her drills, first aid, and tactics. But it had not taught her the quiet moments, the long nights staring at the stars, wondering if she would make it through, or the crushing weight of responsibility when lives depended on her decisions. Her first day began with orientation, a whirlwind of introductions, equipment checks, and tactical briefings. Emily moved quickly, absorbing information and repeating procedures silently in her mind. She tried to hide the nervous tremor in her hands, the flutter in her chest every time a senior officer gave instructions. It was not fear of the mission itself, but fear of failure, of letting down those who would rely on her. During lunch, she found herself at the edge of a table, crowded with her new team. Conversations were laced with laughter and stories of past deployments, yet Emily remained quiet, listening and observing. Every joke, every story, every glance carried lessons she had yet to understand. Sergeant Blake shot her a glance, his expression unreadable. Emily felt a flicker of irritation at his judgment, but quickly swallowed it. She had learned long ago that in a unit like this, actions mattered far more than words. In the afternoon, Captain Reynolds assigned her a routine inspection task, inventorying medical supplies and organizing field kits. Alone in the small tent, Emily moved quickly and methodically, checking every bandage, counting every vial, and cataloging every piece of equipment. The hours passed slowly, each one filled with meticulous attention to detail. She knew these small, often unseen tasks could mean the difference between life and death in the field. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and crimson, Emily took a moment outside to breathe. The base stretched around her, tents fluttering in the dry wind, armored vehicles parked like silent sentinels, and soldiers walking with purpose. In that moment, the enormity of her choice weighed heavily on her shoulders. She was a rookie, yes, but the lives of those around her would soon intersect with hers in ways she could not yet imagine. Nightfall brought a different kind of training. Under the harsh glare of floodlights, Emily joined her unit in combat drills. Exhaustion pressed down on her muscles, but she pushed through, driven by determination. Every move was scrutinized, every mistake noted. Sergeant Blake's presence was constant, his gaze sharp. Emily felt the pressure to perform, not just for herself, but to earn the respect of the men who had already faced what she had only read about in manuals. In a quiet moment, after drills concluded, Emily found a secluded spot behind a sandbag wall. She closed her eyes and let herself breathe. Her mind replayed the day, the introductions, the judgments, the small victories in completing tasks flawlessly. She whispered to herself, "I can do this. I will do this." The words were not just a mantra, but a promise. It was in that silence, under a sky scattered with stars she had only seen from textbooks or city lights, that Emily felt a quiet determination settle into her bones. The rookie had arrived, and though the journey ahead was unknown and terrifying, she would face it head-on. Every drill, every instruction, every skeptical glance was preparing her for a moment she could not yet foresee. Little did Emily know, her courage, determination, and meticulous preparation would soon be tested in ways far beyond routine drills or inventory checks. In a matter of weeks, the rookie would find herself facing chaos, danger, and moments where hesitation could mean death, not just for herself, but for the entire team. The sun had set, and the base settled into a tense quiet. Soldiers shared stories and laughter, but Emily remained alert, her senses sharpened by the anticipation of the unknown. She was ready, not yet a hero, not yet tested by fire, but a rookie who had taken her first step into the crucible of war. And in that first step, the seed of something extraordinary had been planted. The sun had barely risen over the rugged mountains surrounding the base when Emily Carter joined her team for morning briefing. The air was thin and dry, carrying a faint scent of dust and metal. Her uniform, still stiff from yesterday's drills, clung to her as she stood at attention, listening to Captain Reynolds outline the day's mission. A routine patrol in a nearby village, tasked with maintaining security and building relations with the locals. Routine, he said, a word Emily had already learned to question. Emily's mind raced as she adjusted her gear. She felt the weight of the medical pack strapped to her back, a constant reminder that lives might depend on her hands. Her teammates checked their weapons and communications gear, a practiced rhythm born from months or even years in the field. Emily moved alongside them, each step careful, trying to match the pace of veterans who had already faced danger far greater than she could imagine. The convoy rattled along a dusty road, mountains rising sharply on either side, the wind whipping through open hatches. Emily tried to quiet the nervous hum in her stomach. She had studied maps, memorized patrol routes, and drilled for ambush scenarios countless times. Yet nothing could prepare her for the feeling of vulnerability that came with seeing nothing but rocks, dirt, and the faint movement of villagers in the distance. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Every gust of wind sounded like footsteps. When a small child threw a rock at the lead vehicle, Emily flinched. The patrol slowed, and Captain Reynolds gave the soldier driving the convoy a sharp look. The simplicity of the act, just a child's frustration or mischief, was enough to trigger the tension that hung over the patrol. Emily watched the boy scramble away, feeling an unexpected pang of guilt and fear. What if she had reacted differently? What if something she did caused harm? These questions gnawed at her, but she tucked them away, focusing on the mission ahead. The patrol continued, the convoy winding through narrow alleys and crowded streets. Emily observed the villagers, their wary eyes following the soldiers. She noticed a woman carrying a bundle of supplies, a man tending goats, children running between houses. Each human moment reminded her that the mission was not only about protection, but also about understanding the fragile humanity in a place torn by conflict. She realized that her role as a medic wasn't just about treating wounds. It was about preserving lives, dignity, and trust. Their first test came sooner than expected. A sudden explosion rocked the convoy. Emily's ears rang, and dust choked the air. A fellow soldier, Private Harris, collapsed, blood pooling beneath him. Without hesitation, Emily sprang into action. Her training kicked in. Assess, stabilize, communicate. She dropped her pack, pulled supplies, and worked quickly to stem the bleeding. Her hands shook slightly, but she forced herself to focus. Every movement counted. Every decision could save or cost a life. As she worked, her teammates looked on, astonished at her composure. Sergeant Blake, who had spent the first days coldly observing her, stepped closer, barking orders and helping coordinate evacuation. Yet he didn't take over. He trusted her. For the first time, Emily felt the subtle shift from rookie to indispensable member of the team. Her actions had spoken louder than words ever could. The convoy continued, the tension never fully easing. Emily remained alert, checking wounded soldiers, monitoring her surroundings, and silently praying the day wouldn't bring more casualties. Captain Reynolds kept a careful watch, offering quiet guidance, while Blake's occasional nods of approval signaled a grudging respect. Emily realized that this was not just about skill or training. It was about endurance, presence of mind, and the ability to remain calm when chaos threatened to consume everyone. That night, Emily returned to her quarters, exhausted but unable to sleep. She replayed every moment of the day, the child who threw the rock, the explosion, the panic in Harris's eyes, and the trust she had earned from her team. She thought about the weight of the badge on her uniform, the responsibility it symbolized, and the silent promise she had made to herself to never falter. The rookie had survived her first real test, but she understood now that survival alone was not enough. Emily wrote in her journal, words flowing as a release for thoughts too heavy to speak aloud. She documented each incident, her feelings, and the lessons learned. She reflected on the fear she had felt and the courage she had summoned. She realized that being a soldier meant carrying both the visible and invisible burdens, the immediate dangers. Yes, but also the weight of responsibility, the consequences of every choice, and the lives dependent on her decisions. Days passed, and Emily settled into the rhythm of patrols, briefings, and drills. Each day tested her endurance. Each encounter with locals tested her patience, and every tense moment with her team tested her courage. Yet with each challenge, she grew stronger, more confident, and more attuned to the fragile balance between fear and focus. She began to notice the subtleties, the way Blake's gaze softened, the camaraderie that grew silently between herself and the soldiers, and the moments of quiet gratitude from villagers. Emily also faced the internal struggle that came with being a rookie in a war zone. She doubted herself when missions went poorly, when plans were interrupted, or when she failed to act quickly enough. She questioned whether she truly belonged, whether she could ever live up to the expectations of the veterans around her. Yet in those moments of doubt, she remembered the lives she had touched, the injuries she had treated, and the quiet nods of approval that reminded her she was no longer just a newcomer. One evening, after another long patrol, Emily sat alone on a sandbag wall, staring at the mountains silhouetted against the setting sun. She reflected on her journey so far, the fear, the responsibility, and the quiet victories. She understood that being a soldier was not about glory or recognition, but about resilience, presence, and the courage to act when others might freeze. The rookie she had been just weeks ago had begun to transform, shaped by the crucible of real experience. Little did Emily know, the true test of her courage and skill was yet to come. In the days ahead, the patrols would turn more dangerous, the enemy closer, and the moments of fear far more intense. She would be forced to confront situations where hesitation could cost lives, where her decisions alone, might mean the difference between survival and disaster. And in those moments, Emily's quiet determination, meticulous training, and unshakable resolve would be pushed to the limits. For now, though, she breathed deeply, feeling the weight of her uniform, the responsibility of her role, and the growing trust of her team. The rookie had arrived, yes, but she was learning, adapting, and quietly proving that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act in spite of it. And with that realization, Emily Carter took her next step into the dangerous, unpredictable, and life-defining world she had chosen, unaware that she would soon become a hero in ways even she could not yet imagine. The mornings had grown hotter, the patrols longer, and the reality of the deployment more relentless. Emily Carter moved through the base with an ease she had not possessed just weeks ago, her body learning the rhythm of military life, her mind alert to the nuances of danger and duty. Yet what she felt most strongly was the invisible thread that tied her to her team, bonds formed in exhaustion, fear, and the shared weight of responsibility. The unit had become her family, though the term still felt foreign to her. Sergeant Blake, whose skepticism had been sharp and unyielding when she first arrived, now offered subtle nods of approval, brief words of advice, and occasionally a shared joke when the day's stress lifted slightly. Emily noticed the change, even if Blake's pride was buried beneath layers of military stoicism. Captain Reynolds observed her quietly, giving her small assignments that tested her abilities, knowing that the rookie's true strength was still emerging. Emily's mornings began before dawn, running drills, checking weapons, and ensuring that all gear was prepared for the day's patrol. On one early morning, as the sun crested over the mountains, the team gathered for a briefing. They were heading into a village known for occasional insurgent activity. Tension rippled through the group. Seasoned soldiers moved with practiced caution, while Emily felt a mixture of anticipation and dread. She clutched her medical pack, aware that any injury in the field could fall squarely on her hands. The convoy rattled along the rough, narrow roads that cut through arid hills, the dust from their movement hanging in the air like a shroud. Emily noticed the villagers as the patrol entered the settlement, wary eyes, children peeking from behind walls, men and women silently watching. Every step was measured. Every gesture carried meaning. Emily realized that each interaction, however small, could either build trust or deepen suspicion. She moved through the convoy with quiet precision, always alert, always observing. It was during one patrol that the first cracks in Emily's inexperience appeared. A small child ran out from an alleyway, chasing a stray dog. Emily hesitated, unsure whether to stop the child or allow the chaos to unfold. The moment passed without incident, but the hesitation made her heart pound. Sergeant Blake's glare, sharp and assessing, reminded her that indecision could be dangerous here. She took a deep breath, silently promising herself that she would not falter when real danger came. As the day wore on, minor skirmishes and tense exchanges with local villagers tested her composure. Emily found herself gradually gaining the trust of both the soldiers and the civilians. A small act of kindness, helping an elderly woman carry water to her home, brought a smile from the villagers and a nod from Captain Reynolds. In those moments, Emily realized that courage was not only measured by bullets dodged or wounds treated, but also by the humanity preserved amid chaos. The turning point came during a night patrol when the team stumbled upon an improvised explosive device hidden near a narrow alley. The blast would have been catastrophic had they not noticed it in time. Emily's training kicked in. She directed soldiers to secure the perimeter, carefully checked the device from a safe distance, and coordinated with Captain Reynolds on disarming it. Her quick thinking prevented disaster, and for the first time, Sergeant Blake offered her a rare, approving word. "Good call, rookie." That single acknowledgement changed something in Emily. It was not praise she sought, but the recognition that she was trusted, that her skills mattered, and that she could make a difference. The team's dynamics shifted subtly. The soldiers began to see her not as a fragile newcomer, but as a competent, reliable member whose judgment could be counted on under pressure. Emily felt a quiet pride, tempered by the understanding that trust could be lost as easily as it was earned. Late one night, after a patrol had returned, and the base had settled into its uneasy rhythm, Emily found herself sitting beside Blake on a low wall near the tents. Silence stretched between them, punctuated only by distant gunfire and the faint hum of the generators. Blake, surprisingly, spoke first. "You've got guts," he said gruffly, eyes on the horizon. "Most rookies would have panicked back there. You didn't. That counts." Emily nodded, unsure how to respond. Words felt inadequate to express the mix of fear, relief, and pride she felt. Instead, she simply said, "Thanks," letting the quiet acknowledgement speak for itself. The brief exchange, simple as it was, marked a turning point. She was no longer just a rookie. She was becoming part of something larger than herself, a vital link in a chain of survival. The bond with her team deepened over the following weeks. During long patrols, they shared stories of childhood homes, of dreams deferred, of past deployments that had left scars both visible and invisible. Emily listened, absorbing the rhythm of their lives, understanding that trust was built not only through actions, but through shared vulnerability. In return, she shared her own story, the journey from a small town in Ohio to the harsh realities of Afghanistan. The soldiers began to respect her honesty, her willingness to admit fear, and her determination to overcome it. Yet the mountains surrounding their base held a constant reminder of danger. Emily learned that even routine missions could become deadly in an instant. Every patrol carried uncertainty, every turn of a road or narrow alley a potential threat. The bond between her and the team became a lifeline, a source of strength when fear threatened to paralyze them. Emily realized that she was no longer just observing, learning, and following. She was actively shaping the team's survival, offering calm judgment and unwavering support in moments of tension. By the end of the month, Emily had transformed. The rookie who had arrived unsure and apprehensive now moved with quiet confidence, her actions deliberate and precise, her decisions grounded in both training and experience. Captain Reynolds acknowledged her progress with subtle gestures, assigning her slightly more responsibility, asking for her input during briefings. Blake's demeanor softened further. She could see his respect in the way he now occasionally offered advice rather than criticism. Emily knew, however, that trust and skill alone would not shield them from what was to come. The enemy was always near, hidden in villages, mountains, and the dusty plains. The moments of calm could evaporate in seconds, replaced by the chaos of ambush, injury, or death. But Emily no longer faced that knowledge with paralyzing fear. She felt a sense of readiness, honed by countless patrols, quiet victories, and the bonds she had forged with her team. One evening, as the sun dipped below the jagged peaks, Emily stood at the edge of the base, watching shadows stretch across the desert floor. She reflected on her journey so far, the sleepless nights, the minor victories, the subtle acknowledgments from her teammates. She knew that the bonds she had built were fragile, yet invaluable. They were not just comrades. They were a lifeline, and in a place where every second could mean life or death, that connection was everything. Little did she know, the unity and trust she had cultivated would soon be put to the ultimate test. A mission in the mountains, which began like any other, would soon spiral into chaos. Ambushes, injuries, and life or death decisions loomed on the horizon. Emily, the rookie who had learned to earn trust and build bonds, would find herself at the center of a storm where courage, quick thinking, and leadership would determine the fate of her team. For now, she breathed in the desert air, feeling both the weight of responsibility and the growing strength within her. She was learning, adapting, and surviving, and the rookie who had once doubted herself had begun transforming into a soldier capable of extraordinary things. The bonds in the battlefield were solidifying, ready to be tested by fire. The morning sun rose over jagged mountains, casting long shadows across the rugged terrain. Emily Carter climbed into the armored Humvee alongside her unit, her heart beating with a mixture of anticipation and unease. Today's mission was a reconnaissance patrol, described by Captain Reynolds as routine. Yet Emily knew that in this land, there was no such thing as routine. Every step could hide danger. Every rock, every shadow, could conceal an ambush waiting to explode. The convoy moved steadily along a narrow mountain pass. Dust and pebbles kicked up from the vehicles, settling on faces, uniforms, and weapons. Emily's hands rested lightly on her medical pack, her eyes scanning the hillsides, always alert. The soldiers moved with practiced precision, communication sparse but efficient. Even Blake, who had softened toward Emily over the past weeks, now radiated tense readiness. The air was thick with anticipation. Minutes stretched, hours passed, and the mountains seemed almost serene, too serene. Emily felt it in her bones, that nagging sense of foreboding. She shifted in her seat, trying to quiet the tension that gripped her chest. Captain Reynolds's voice crackled through the radio, calm but clipped. Stay alert. We stick to the plan. Eyes open, keep tight formations. The soldiers nodded, and the convoy pressed forward. The first sign of trouble came suddenly. A rock dislodged from the cliff above, tumbling down and striking the lead vehicle. The sound was subtle at first, a dull thump, but the soldiers immediately recognized the danger. Emily's stomach twisted. This was no accident. Someone or something was watching them. Captain Reynolds slowed the convoy, signaling for heightened awareness. Then it began. Bullets rained down from the cliffs above, whistling through the dry air. The first explosion rocked the convoy, throwing dust, smoke, and fear into the canyon. The Humvee jolted violently, throwing Emily against her seatbelt. A nearby soldier cried out, and Emily's hands moved instinctively, unfastening her belt, grabbing her medical pack, and sprinting toward the wounded. Chaos erupted. The convoy scattered, engines screaming, soldiers shouting orders over the cacophony of gunfire. Emily's mind sharpened into focus. Training took over. She ducked low, weaving between vehicles, checking on the injured, stabilizing soldiers hit by flying shrapnel. Sergeant Blake shouted directions, coordinating defense and return fire. But Captain Reynolds was struck in the first moments of the ambush, collapsing against the side of a Humvee. Emily froze for a heartbeat, the enormity of the situation crashing down on her. The commanding officer was down, communications were cut, and the enemy fire showed no sign of letting up. Yet instinct, training, and determination propelled her forward. She grabbed Captain Reynolds's radio, trying to reach command. Static answered her, and a cold realization settled. They were isolated, completely, alone. A scream tore through the canyon as one of the younger soldiers. Private Harris fell to the ground, blood pooling around him. Emily's heart raced, but she forced herself to move. She knelt beside him, assessing injuries, applying a tourniquet, and murmuring reassurances she barely felt. Her hands shook slightly, but her focus never wavered. Every second mattered. Every decision could mean life or death. The ambush intensified. Bullets ricocheted off rocks, dust filled the air, and smoke curled from destroyed vehicles. Emily directed her team, shouting for cover, checking positions, and ensuring that wounded soldiers were stabilized. Blake moved alongside her, still shouting orders, but trusting her judgment. In that chaos, Emily became more than a rookie. She became a leader by necessity. Her voice, calm yet firm, cut through the storm of fear. Minutes stretched into eternity. Emily dragged Harris to cover, returning fire only when necessary. She checked each soldier, moving with precision. Exhaustion pressed on her limbs, yet adrenaline and focus kept her moving. Every instinct she had honed in training now guided her actions. She realized that survival depended not only on skill but on courage, the courage to act when fear screamed to freeze. The ambush dragged on. Emily's vision blurred from dust and sweat, her muscles screaming from movement and tension. She crouched behind a jagged rock, assessing the next move. Reinforcements were hours away, if they even arrived in time. Captain Reynolds, barely conscious, muttered instructions, relying on her now more than ever. Emily nodded, acknowledging the responsibility thrust upon her. She could not falter. Too many lives depended on her. In a moment of clarity amidst chaos, Emily made a daring decision. The unit was pinned from multiple angles, and Blake was trapped near the center of the firing line. Without hesitation, she bolted into the open, sprinting toward him, ignoring the bullets that tore past. Her heart pounded, fear screaming in her ears, yet each step was deliberate, precise. She reached Blake, grabbed his arm, and dragged him to safety behind a Humvee. The team, seeing her courage, rallied. Soldiers who had been frozen by fear now moved with renewed purpose, inspired by the rookie who refused to be defeated. Emily's leadership, born of necessity and determination, transformed the tide of the ambush. Though exhausted and battered, she maintained order, giving instructions, tending to the wounded, and ensuring that no one was left behind. Hours later, as the sun began its descent and shadows stretched across the canyon floor, the ambush subsided. The enemy retreated, leaving a trail of destruction and exhaustion in their wake. Emily collapsed beside the Humvee, sweat, dust, and blood streaked across her uniform. She looked around at her team, bruised, shaken, but alive. Captain Reynolds, bandaged and leaning on a vehicle, gave her a nod of quiet approval. Blake, normally stoic, offered a rare smile, gratitude clear in his eyes. The rookie had survived her first true test, and more than that, she had saved her team. The enormity of the day settled heavily on Emily's shoulders. She had faced the unimaginable, and yet she had endured, acted, and led. The mission had gone horribly wrong, but in that chaos, she had discovered a depth of courage and resilience she had not known she possessed. As night fell over the mountains, Emily sat beside a sandbag wall, listening to the distant hum of generators and the occasional voice of a soldier recounting the day's events. Her body ached, and her mind replayed every second, the bullets, the screams, the fear, and the moments of clarity where instinct took over. She realized that the battlefield was no longer just a place of physical danger. It was a test of the spirit, of the heart, and of the mind. The rookie who had arrived uncertain, nervous, and untested had become something more. She was still young, still learning, but she had faced fire and emerged not only alive, but stronger, more confident, and more capable than she could have imagined. Emily understood now that this was only the beginning. The mountains, the villages, and the dangers yet unseen would continue to challenge her. But one thing was certain. She would not falter. Not now. Not ever. The air was thick with smoke, dust, and the acrid scent of gunpowder. Emily Carter pressed herself against the jagged rocks of the canyon, the sun's harsh glare cutting across the battlefield like a knife. Her uniform was streaked with sweat, dirt, and blood, her own and that of her team. The ambush had not relented. Enemy fire continued from elevated positions, bullets screaming past, ricocheting off stone, metal, and sand. Chaos reigned, yet Emily's mind sharpened to a crystalline focus. Panic was a luxury she could not afford. Captain Reynolds, wounded and leaning against the side of a Humvee, shouted orders, his voice strained. The radio was useless, static replacing any hope of outside communication. Blake was pinned down in the open, his rifle abandoned beside him. Emily's heart hammered, but training and instinct propelled her forward. Each step was calculated, deliberate. Bullets whizzed past, and dust exploded around her. She moved with precision, dodging debris, yelling directions to the soldiers who looked to her for guidance. Private Harris moaned from a shallow crater, bleeding from a leg wound. Emily dropped beside him, assessing quickly. Her hands, though trembling slightly from exhaustion and adrenaline, moved with purpose. She applied a tourniquet, checked his airway, and whispered reassurances that even she barely felt. Time seemed suspended. Every second carried infinite weight. She looked around. The team was scattered, some crouched behind vehicles, others pinned against rocks. Fear was palpable, yet her calm presence gave them an anchor. Blake, frozen in the open, raised his hand in silent plea. Emily assessed the angle of enemy fire, calculated the safest path, and bolted. Bullets tore through the air around her, some striking dangerously close, but she pressed on. Each leap over rubble, each sprint across exposed ground, was a calculated risk. The world narrowed to a singular mission: save Blake, save her team, survive. She reached Blake, grabbing his arm and pulling him behind cover behind a large Humvee. The relief in his eyes was fleeting, replaced quickly by renewed tension. Emily's voice cut through the chaos, firm and commanding. Stay low. Watch angles. Move when I say. For the first time, the team wasn't following rank. They were following her instinct, her courage, and her unwavering determination. The firefight raged. Explosions rocked the canyon, dust and debris clouding vision. Emily moved among the soldiers, stabilizing the wounded, redistributing ammunition, and giving rapid instructions. Every move was a lifeline, every word a guidepost in a storm of bullets and chaos. Her body ached, muscles screaming from exhaustion, but she forced herself to continue. She knew that hesitation now could cost lives. One soldier was caught in an exposed position, screaming as enemy fire raked across the rocks. Emily didn't pause. She sprinted toward him, dragging him to safety, her body shielding him from gunfire. The world seemed unreal, explosions, shouts, the metallic tang of blood, yet she was methodical. Survival demanded precision, courage, and unwavering focus. She was no longer just a rookie. She was the anchor of her team under fire. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes. Time was meaningless in the relentless intensity of the battle. Emily coordinated defensive positions, instructed soldiers to cover each other, and checked wounds. Her hands, now coated in dirt, blood, and sweat, moved instinctively. She felt every heartbeat as if it were her own, every shiver of fear in her team a personal responsibility. The canyon was a crucible, and she was emerging from it, tempered, tested, and resolute. At one point, she found herself crouched behind a jagged rock, the canyon stretching around her in a chaotic mosaic of smoke, dust, and fire. A glance revealed a soldier in shock, frozen by fear. Emily's voice was steady, unwavering, slicing through panic. Focus, breathe, cover your angle. Move with me. He nodded, hesitance replaced by determination. Her courage had become contagious. Her calm, decisive actions guiding them like a beacon through the storm. By midday, the team had established a makeshift defensive perimeter. Emily moved between positions, checking on the wounded, redistributing water, and coordinating covering fire. Blake, now recovered enough to move, glanced at her with an unspoken question. Emily nodded, signaling that it was time to break the stalemate. Every step forward was deliberate. The team moved as one, following the direction of the rookie who had saved them all, navigating through chaos with precision born of trust and instinct. The enemy, realizing their initial ambush had failed, began to retreat. Silence descended gradually, punctuated by the groans and murmurs of soldiers checking each other for injuries. Emily collapsed beside a Humvee, muscles trembling, chest heaving. Her hands were stained, her uniform torn, but she felt a quiet, profound sense of accomplishment. She had faced unrelenting fire, chaos, and fear, and emerged not only alive, but as the cornerstone of her team's survival. Captain Reynolds, leaning on a rock, bandaged and exhausted, finally spoke, voice hoarse but steady. "Carter, you did what I've seen few do in my career. You led when there was no one else to lead." Blake, normally reserved and gruff, offered a nod, eyes glistening with unshed tears. Emily's chest swelled, not with pride, but with an awareness of the weight she now bore. She had saved lives, yes, but the responsibility of that action, the memory of every moment under fire, would remain with her forever. Even as the smoke cleared and dust settled, Emily's mind replayed every second, the screams, the gunfire, the terror, and the moments of clarity. She understood now that courage was not the absence of fear, it was the ability to act in the face of it, to make decisions that could save others while risking yourself. In that battlefield crucible, the rookie had become something more, a leader, a protector, and a symbol of resilience. When reinforcements finally arrived, Emily's team was still intact, bloodied and exhausted, but alive. Soldiers who had doubted her, who had whispered about her inexperience, now looked at her with reverence. She had carried them through hell, had become the steady hand and the guiding voice amidst unthinkable chaos. She allowed herself a brief moment of rest, closing her eyes as the sun dipped behind the mountains. The rookie had survived, yes, but she had also saved her team. And in that moment, Emily Carter realized the profound truth. War was unpredictable, brutal, and merciless, but courage, determination, and loyalty could make the impossible possible. The battlefield had tested her in ways she had never imagined, and she had passed. She had proven to herself, and to everyone around her, that she was no longer just a rookie. She was a soldier, a leader, and a survivor under fire. Night had fallen over the rugged Afghan mountains, turning the battlefield into a shadowy maze. Emily Carter crouched behind a sandbag wall with her team, every sense sharpened to detect even the faintest rustle of movement. The ambush had ended hours ago, but the adrenaline refused to leave her veins. She wiped dust and sweat from her brow, her muscles screaming from exertion, yet she knew that rest would be fleeting. Danger was still present, hidden in the darkness beyond the perimeter. Captain Reynolds had instructed them to fortify their positions. Emily moved between her teammates, checking on the wounded, ensuring that those still able to move were safely covered. Blake, sitting silently beside her, adjusted ammunition and quietly surveyed the perimeter. Emily's voice, calm yet firm, cut through the tension. "We stay alert. Shift positions every hour. Check your sectors. Don't let your guard down." Her orders were concise, precise, a guide through the chaos that could return at any moment. The team had sustained injuries, some minor, some serious. Emily attended to each soldier with meticulous care. She cleaned wounds, applied bandages, and reassured the frightened. Her hands were coated in dried blood and dirt, but she moved with precision. Each soldier's survival depended on her vigilance. She understood that, even more than during the firefight, the night would test their endurance, their courage, and their resolve. Time slowed in the darkness. The moon cast pale light across the terrain, illuminating jagged rocks and deserted pathways. Every shadow seemed to hide an unseen threat. Emily's eyes scanned the perimeter constantly, her mind calculating risks, anticipating danger. She whispered instructions to soldiers stationed at critical points, making adjustments to the defensive setup. Her quiet authority, born of the day's trials, held the team together. Without her calm presence, fear might have paralyzed them entirely. Hours passed, each one stretching longer than the last. Emily felt exhaustion pressing against her chest, threatening to sap focus, but she refused to succumb. She moved again to Private Harris, who had been hit in the leg during the ambush. He was trembling, half-conscious from pain and fear. Emily knelt beside him, holding his hand while securing a makeshift splint. Her voice was steady. "You'll be okay. Stay with me. We'll make it through this." She drew strength from the necessity of her role. Hesitation could cost him his life. Blake approached, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Carter," he muttered, voice hoarse. "How are you still?" He didn't finish the sentence. Emily offered a tired smile. "I have to be. You all need me right now." He nodded silently, a rare acknowledgement of her leadership. For the first time, she truly understood the full weight of the badge, the unspoken responsibility that came with guiding her team through danger. The enemy was still out there, a ghostly presence in the darkness. Emily instructed the team to maintain strict silence, to keep watch, and to conserve energy. She herself moved from position to position, checking on the injured, offering whispered encouragement, and reinforcing fortifications. Her body ached, her hands were blistered and raw, but the lives around her demanded every ounce of her strength. Each decision, each small movement, could mean survival. Midnight brought a sudden burst of tension. A distant crack echoed from the canyon edge, a single gunshot, or perhaps a falling rock. Soldiers froze, hearts hammering. Emily's voice rose, calm yet commanding. "Stay low. Cover angles. Don't move unless I say." She crept toward the noise, scanning shadows, assessing potential threats. Minutes later, nothing further happened, yet the adrenaline spike left her breathless. She returned to her team, ensuring everyone remained composed and ready. Emily realized that the night would test more than physical endurance. It would test mental resilience. Fear could spread like wildfire, paralyzing even seasoned soldiers. She whispered reminders, offered quiet reassurances, and shared stories from training to distract and calm. Her presence became a shield as powerful as any barrier or weapon. Every soldier, even Blake, drew strength from her unwavering focus. Hours blurred. Sleep was impossible, yet Emily knew rest was critical. She rotated soldiers in shifts, allowing brief periods of closure while ensuring vigilance remained. Each time she returned to her own post, exhaustion threatened to overtake her, but she stood firm, eyes scanning the horizon, hands on her gear. The rook who had arrived uncertain and anxious had transformed into the steady heartbeat of her team, the anchor in a storm of fear. By the early hours of dawn, Emily noticed subtle changes in her soldiers. Panic and tension had begun to ebb slightly. They whispered quietly among themselves, sharing fears, hopes, and small comforts. Emily moved through them, offering encouragement, reinforcing the perimeter, and quietly ensuring that every soldier remained ready for any sudden attack. Her calm had become contagious. Courage, when demonstrated clearly, could inspire even the most exhausted to endure. The sunrise began to paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. The long night was not over, but the worst of its psychological grip had loosened. Emily finally allowed herself a moment to sit, leaning against a sandbag wall, hands gripping her knees. Her body was battered, her mind exhausted, yet she felt a quiet pride. She had guided her team through the longest, most grueling night of their deployment, a night where fear, fatigue, and uncertainty could have easily claimed them all. Captain Reynolds, still leaning on the Humvee, gave her a nod. "You've done more than I could have asked, Carter. You kept everyone alive. That counts for everything." Emily nodded silently, knowing that the words were not praise alone, but recognition of the heavy burden she had carried. Blake, normally stoic, added simply, "You saved us tonight. That's all that matters." Emily allowed herself a quiet exhale. The night had been a crucible, a test of endurance, courage, and leadership. She had faced exhaustion, fear, and chaos, yet she had emerged unbroken. Her team survived, guided by her instincts, her training, and her unwavering determination. She realized that survival in war required more than skill. It demanded presence, resilience, and the ability to inspire others under extreme pressure. As the team prepared for the day's patrols, Emily helped stabilize the wounded, checked ammunition, and ensured water rations were distributed. She moved among her soldiers, offering words of encouragement and support. The rookie had become more than a soldier. She was a leader, a lifeline, and a beacon of courage for those who depended on her. Even in the exhaustion of dawn, Emily understood that the challenges were far from over. The mountains, villages, and enemy forces would continue to test her, her team, and the bonds they had forged. Yet the experience of the longest night had forged something unbreakable within her: confidence, resilience, and an unshakable commitment to protect those around her. In that early morning light, Emily Carter stood, weary but resolute. The longest night had passed, and though her body ached and her spirit was stretched, she knew that she and her team had survived because she refused to let fear dictate action. The rookie who had once trembled at the thought of failure had grown into a soldier who could face the darkest hours without flinching, and soon she would face even greater tests. The sun had fully risen over the rugged Afghan mountains, casting long shadows over the base. Emily Carter sat on a worn sandbag wall, staring blankly at the jagged horizon. The long night had ended, but its echo lingered in every creak of armor, every groan of the wounded, and every whispered conversation. The ambush had been survived, the enemy had retreated, but the scars, both visible and invisible, were only beginning to reveal themselves. Captain Reynolds moved carefully between the soldiers, checking on wounds and injuries. His eyes fell on Emily, and though his face remained stoic, there was an unmistakable hint of pride. "Carter," he said softly, "get some rest when you can. You've earned it." She nodded silently, the words not enough to capture the whirlwind of emotions she carried. Relief, exhaustion, fear, and pride all collided within her chest, making her feel both heavier and stronger than she had ever felt before. Blake approached her, carrying a canteen of water. "You need this more than anyone," he said gruffly, handing it over. Emily took a careful sip, her throat dry from the past night's chaos. They sat in silence for a moment, the sounds of the base around them a dull hum compared to the symphony of gunfire and explosions still ringing in their ears. Blake broke the quiet first. "You kept us alive. All of us. I didn't think a rookie could handle that." His eyes, normally unreadable, reflected genuine respect. Emily offered a tired smile. "I didn't do it alone. You all. We did it together." The wounded were being treated in the makeshift medical tent. Emily moved between them, checking bandages, monitoring vitals, and offering quiet reassurances. She was exhausted, her body screaming for rest, but she could not ignore the lingering responsibility. Every injury, every shiver of pain, reminded her of the precariousness of life in this environment. She had saved them once, but she knew the battlefield offered no guarantees, and the weight of that knowledge pressed down on her shoulders. The soldiers spoke in hushed tones, recounting moments from the ambush, their voices tinged with awe, disbelief, and sometimes shame at near mistakes. Emily listened, offering advice, encouragement, and sometimes simply a hand to squeeze or a reassuring nod. She realized that the emotional aftermath was as grueling as the physical. Fear lingered long after bullets had ceased to fly, and guilt often clung to those who had survived when others had not. She had felt that weight too, and she knew it would be a constant companion. Later, in the quiet of the command tent, Emily met with Captain Reynolds and Blake. Maps and reports were spread across the table, but the conversation was less about strategy and more about reflection. The unit performed well, given the circumstances, Reynolds said, his voice measured. But Carter, you were the glue. You made decisions under fire that saved lives. That's not something many can claim. Emily felt a lump in her throat, but nodded. She had no desire for praise. Her satisfaction came from knowing her team had survived. Blake leaned back, eyes distant. I've been in situations like this before, he muttered, voice low. Most rookies fold. You didn't. You led. I don't know if I've ever seen someone move like that under fire. Emily shook her head. I didn't think about leading. I did what had to be done. Yet she knew that in the silence that followed, they both understood. Her calm, decisive action had been the difference between life and death. As the day wore on, Emily finally allowed herself a brief moment of rest. She lay on the cold ground, her body stretched out but alert, listening to the faint sounds of soldiers repairing vehicles, tending to wounded comrades, and preparing for the next mission. Sleep came in short bursts, dreamless and fragmented, but even in those moments, her mind replayed the chaos, the terror, and the decisions that had defined the ambush. The emotional toll became more evident as she moved among her team. Private Harris, who had been severely injured, flinched at sudden noises. Another soldier, quiet and reserved, stared blankly at nothing for long minutes at a time. Emily offered comfort, guidance, and, where words failed, simply her presence. She realized that surviving the battlefield was not just about physical endurance. It was about healing the mind, reassuring the spirit, and fostering resilience that could weather future storms. By evening, a semblance of routine returned. The wounded were stabilized, defensive positions reinforced, and the team gathered for a brief debrief. Captain Reynolds spoke carefully, acknowledging the bravery, skill, and resilience displayed during the ambush. Emily listened, heart heavy yet steady, aware that the team's trust and survival had been won not by rank alone, but by courage under fire. She understood that her role had shifted irrevocably. She was no longer just a rookie learning the ropes. She was a cornerstone of their unit. Blake caught her gaze across the room, nodding subtly. Emily returned it, understanding the unspoken acknowledgement. They had endured something extraordinary together. Bonds had been forged in blood, fear, and the relentless pressure of survival. She could see it in their expressions, the way they moved, the unspoken trust that now connected them in ways words could not describe. The battlefield had tested them, and they had emerged stronger, united, and prepared for the challenges ahead. Yet, even as the team began to recover, Emily could not shake the lingering questions. How many more ambushes would they survive? How many more nights of fear and exhaustion lay ahead? She felt the weight of responsibility, knowing that her decisions, her courage, and her presence would continue to determine the fate of her comrades. The rookie who had once doubted herself now understood that leadership came with a relentless burden, one she would carry with unwavering determination. As night fell again, Emily stood on a ridge overlooking the mountains, the fading light casting long shadows across the terrain. She reflected on the past days, the ambush, the long night, and the emotional aftermath that had tested every fiber of her being. She realized that war was not just a physical battle. It was a test of heart, mind, and spirit. Courage, she understood now, was not a momentary act, but a sustained commitment to protect, lead, and endure, even when fear threatened to overwhelm. Emily Carter had survived, yes, but more importantly, She had guided her team through the crucible, faced the emotional toll of survival, and emerged as a soldier whose courage inspired others. The battlefield had left scars, visible and invisible, but it had also forged resilience, trust, and a bond between her and her comrades that would never break. As she descended back into the base, Emily felt a quiet determination settle within her. The ambush had ended, but the war was far from over. There would be more missions, more dangers, and more moments where lives depended on split-second decisions. Yet she was ready. She had faced fire, fear, and exhaustion, and she had prevailed. The rookie who had arrived uncertain, inexperienced, and nervous had become something far greater, a leader, a protector, and a soldier capable of facing the unknown with courage and resolve. The early morning sun barely pierced the dust-laden air as Emily Carter adjusted her gear. Today's mission was critical. Intelligence reports had confirmed enemy movement near a small village known to harbor insurgents. The unit would move in to secure civilians and gather crucial information. Emily's team had recovered from the previous ambush, but tension hung over them like a shadow. No one spoke much. Everyone felt the weight of what had happened and the fear of what could still occur. Emily, however, felt a strange calm settle over her. The rookie who had arrived uncertain weeks ago had been forged by fire, tested by ambushes, exhaustion, and the long night. Every decision she had made since stepping into this war zone had strengthened her, not just physically, but mentally. She knew that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. Today, that courage would be tested like never before. The convoy moved cautiously through the winding mountain roads, dust swirling behind them. Soldiers' eyes scanned every slope, every shadow, every rooftop. Emily's hands rested lightly on her medical pack, but her mind was alert, calculating, predicting. The enemy had learned from previous mistakes. This time, they were prepared. Emily could sense it. Every instinct in her body screamed, this mission would not go as planned. It began almost immediately. An explosion ripped through the rear of the convoy, throwing vehicles off balance and showering everyone with rock and dust. Bullets whizzed past, sharp and relentless. Soldiers shouted, returning fire while trying to regain control. Emily's heart pounded, but her training, experience, and instinct propelled her into action. She moved quickly, assessing injuries, stabilizing the wounded, and coordinating defensive positions. A young soldier, no older than Emily herself, was pinned behind a Humvee, unable to move. Emily darted across open ground, bullets kicking up dirt around her. She reached him, pulling him into cover, applying a tourniquet to a bleeding leg, and whispering words of encouragement. She barely felt herself. Every second mattered. Every decision could save a life or end it. Blake shouted from across the battlefield, signaling for reinforcements, but Emily realized they were isolated again. The enemy had them surrounded in pockets, using the village's layout to their advantage. Emily's eyes scanned for escape routes, firing positions, and safe zones. Her mind raced through training, previous ambushes, and instinct. She directed her team with clarity, commanding defensive positions and movement sequences that minimized exposure. The firefight intensified. Civilians, caught in the crossfire, screamed for safety. Emily moved among them, shielding them from stray bullets, guiding them towards safer areas. Her presence became a lifeline, her calm commands cutting through fear and chaos. She realized that being a medic was no longer her only role. She was leading, protecting, and inspiring those around her. An enemy fighter appeared unexpectedly on a rooftop, aiming at Blake. Emily didn't hesitate. She sprinted into an open area, drew fire away, and took the enemy by surprise. In that split second, she had saved Blake's life. The team, seeing her courage, rallied, returning fire with renewed focus. Emily's instincts, honed by countless hours of patrols, ambushes, and the long night, guided them to stabilize their position and counter the assault. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Emily's arms were sore from dragging wounded soldiers to cover. Her lungs burned from exertion and dust. Yet she remained relentless, moving through chaos with precision. Every glance at a teammate reminded her of the stakes. Every life depended on her ability to stay calm, act decisively, and make split-second choices. She was no longer a rookie. She was the heart of the team under fire. Suddenly, the enemy surged from the narrow alleys, attempting to flank them. Emily assessed quickly. The main path to the village center was too exposed. Using her knowledge of terrain in previous encounters, she orchestrated a tactical maneuver, guiding her team through cover and drawing the enemy into a narrow pass where their assault could be repelled. Her strategy worked. The team regrouped, casualties stabilized, and the enemy retreated under concentrated fire. The battle was far from over, but Emily's leadership had shifted the tide. Soldiers who had once doubted her now looked to her for direction, following her commands without hesitation. Captain Reynolds, still injured, nodded in acknowledgement, allowing Emily to take the lead fully. Every decision she made was precise, every movement deliberate. Her courage inspired her team, giving them the strength to continue when fear threatened to overwhelm them. As the sun climbed higher, the village fell quiet. The enemy had been repelled, civilians were safe, and the team had survived unscathed, thanks largely to Emily's actions. She moved through the aftermath, checking the wounded, coordinating evacuation of supplies, and ensuring communication with headquarters. The rookie who had once doubted herself now carried the confidence of experience, leadership, and courage. She had transformed completely, tested by fire, and emerging as a hero under unimaginable pressure. Captain Reynolds approached her finally, his expression a mix of pride and awe. "Emily Carter," he said, voice low but firm. "Today you saved lives. Today, you didn't just survive, you led. You're no longer a rookie. You're a soldier, a leader, and a hero." Emily's chest swelled, not with pride alone, but with the weight of responsibility and the knowledge that her courage had mattered. She nodded silently, letting the moment settle in. Blake, standing beside her, placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did what none of us expected," he said, voice quiet. "You saved us all. That's something no training, no rank could teach. That's something only courage can create." Emily felt the weight of his words, understanding fully the depth of the trust, reliance, and respect she had earned. She had faced fear, chaos, and near-certain death, and she had emerged not just alive, but as the guiding force for her team. Even as the adrenaline faded and the dust settled, Emily remained vigilant. The battlefield had tested her in every way, physically, mentally, and emotionally. She had endured exhaustion, fear, and unrelenting chaos. Yet she had proven that courage, determination, and leadership could turn the tide. She was no longer the nervous rookie who had arrived weeks ago. She was a soldier forged by fire, a hero under the most extreme conditions, and a protector whose actions had saved lives. As the team regrouped and prepared to return to base, Emily paused, looking over the village. The civilians waved silently, gratitude in their eyes. Soldiers cleaned weapons, tended to the wounded, and shared quiet words of relief. Emily's heart swelled with a mixture of exhaustion and purpose. She understood that heroism was not about recognition or glory. It was about courage, presence, and the willingness to act when others could not. That day, Emily Carter had faced the unimaginable. She had been pinned under fire, surrounded by danger, and forced to make life-or-death decisions in an instant. She had led her team, protected civilians, and saved lives. The rookie who had once doubted herself had grown into a leader, a hero, and an enduring symbol of courage. The battlefield had tested her, shaped her, and revealed the depth of strength she had always possessed. As the convoy slowly moved back toward the base, Emily sat quietly, her hands gripping her medical pack. Exhaustion pressed against her, but she felt a sense of calm, purpose, and accomplishment. She had faced fear, chaos, and the unthinkable, and she had triumphed. The rookie was gone. In her place stood a soldier, a leader, and a hero under fire. And though battles would continue, challenges would arise, and dangers would persist, Emily knew she was ready. The mountains stretched endlessly before them, a silent reminder of the trials they had faced and the resilience they had forged. Emily Carter had become more than a rookie. She had become a hero, one who would never forget the lessons of courage, the weight of responsibility, and the lives she had saved under fire.